What if I told you that the real reason many older men stop caring about women has nothing to do with bitterness, heartbreak, or giving up on love, and everything to do with a realization that arrives later in life? A realization so powerful that once a man sees it, he can never look at relationships the same way again. Right now, there are thousands of older men quietly stepping back. Not because they cannot date, not because women are no longer interested in them, and not because they have suddenly become cold or emotionally unavailable. The truth is far more complicated. What is happening is that many older men have reached a stage in life where they see things with a level of clarity they never had when they were younger. My name is Isabella, and on this channel, we explore relationship psychology, human behavior, attraction, and the deeper truths that shape the way men and women connect with each other. For many older men, this shift did not happen after one bad relationship or one painful breakup. It happened gradually. Year after year, experience taught them lessons they could not have learned any other way. They began noticing patterns. They started understanding what brought peace into their lives and what repeatedly took it away. They learned that not every relationship adds value and that not every connection is worth protecting. What makes this interesting is that most older men never talk openly about it. They do not post long emotional messages online. They do not announce their decisions to the world. Instead, they quietly change. When someone asks why they seem different, they often give simple answers. I'm focusing on myself. I'm enjoying my peace. I'm not interested right now. But beneath those simple answers is a deeper truth. Many older men have reached a point where their emotional energy feels too valuable to waste, their peace too important to sacrifice, and their remaining years too precious to spend chasing things that no longer bring them genuine happiness. One of the biggest reasons older men stop caring about women is something most people never expect. It is not anger. It is not resentment. It is not a broken heart that never healed. It is the discovery that life can be remarkably peaceful when it is free from unnecessary emotional chaos. When men are younger, many of them spend years chasing approval, validation, and relationships. They believe that finding the right woman will solve the emptiness they feel or complete a missing piece of their life. They pursue, they impress, they sacrifice, they invest enormous amounts of time and energy trying to build relationships, often placing their own needs at the bottom of the list. But something changes as they grow older. An older man no longer feels the same need to prove himself. He no longer measures his value by how attractive he appears to women or by whether he is receiving attention. After decades of life experience, he begins focusing on something far more important: his mental and emotional stability. This is where many women become confused. They assume an older man has become uninterested in love. In reality, many of these men still appreciate companionship and connection. What they have lost interest in is anything that threatens their peace. They have experienced enough stress, enough pressure, and enough emotional ups and downs to understand the cost that comes with certain relationships. A younger man often chases excitement because excitement feels meaningful. An older man has already lived through enough excitement to know that it does not always lead to happiness. What he values now is calmness. He values waking up without conflict. He values living without constant emotional tension. He values relationships that feel easy rather than exhausting. Once an older man experiences that level of peace, something remarkable happens. He starts asking a question he never asked when he was younger. Does this relationship improve my life, or does it make it harder? And if the answer is not clear, he becomes far less willing to invest his time, energy, and emotions than he once was. Another reason many older men begin disconnecting from women is because they eventually reach a painful realization. For years, sometimes decades, they spent their lives giving their time, their energy, their loyalty, their support, and their resources. They showed up when they were needed. They carried responsibilities quietly. They worked through stress without complaint. They sacrificed more than most people ever knew. Yet somewhere along the way, many of them started feeling as though very few people truly noticed. This is not something older men often talk about. In fact, most never mention it at all. They simply carry the feeling privately. The feeling that their efforts were expected rather than appreciated. That their sacrifices were treated as obligations rather than acts of love. That they were valued more for what they provided than for who they actually were. Over time, that feeling begins to wear a man down. The interesting part is that many older men do not become angry about it. They become tired. There is a huge difference. Angry people fight. Tired people withdraw. And for many older men, withdrawal feels easier than constantly trying to explain what they have been carrying for years. Society spends a great deal of time discussing what women need emotionally, and those conversations are important. But there is another side that often remains unspoken. Many older men quietly feel unseen, not unloved, not abandoned, unseen. When a man spends enough years feeling that way, something changes inside him. He stops chasing recognition. He stops trying to convince people of his value. He stops explaining what he brings to the table. Instead, he becomes more selective about where he invests his effort. That is why many older men appear indifferent from the outside. What people mistake for not caring is often something else entirely. It is exhaustion. It is the realization that peace feels better than constantly giving without feeling genuinely appreciated in return. Another major reason older men stop caring about women is because they finally learn the difference between companionship and chaos. When a man is younger, he often tolerates things he should not tolerate. He ignores warning signs. He excuses behavior that repeatedly disrupts his peace. He convinces himself that love requires endless patience, endless sacrifice, and endless understanding, no matter what the other person brings into the relationship. But age changes perspective. An older man has lived through enough experiences to recognize patterns quickly. He knows what constant conflict feels like. He knows what emotional manipulation looks like. He knows the exhaustion that comes from walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid arguments, misunderstandings, or unnecessary tension. What once seemed normal now feels completely unnecessary. This is why many older men become far less tolerant of drama. It is not because they have become cold. It is because they have learned what conflict costs. They understand how quickly stress can drain their energy, affect their health, and steal their peace of mind. A younger man may mistake emotional intensity for passion. An older man usually knows better. He understands that passion without respect rarely lasts. He understands that attraction without stability creates problems. And he understands that affection means very little when it comes packaged with constant frustration. As a result, many older men begin evaluating relationships through a completely different lens. Instead of asking, "How exciting is this woman?" they start asking, "How peaceful is life when she is around?" That question changes everything. The moment a relationship starts bringing unnecessary conflict, many older men disconnect internally. They may remain polite, they may remain respectful, They may even continue the conversation, but emotionally, they begin stepping away. Not because they do not care about women, but because they have learned that peace is worth protecting, and they are no longer willing to sacrifice it for excitement, attention, or temporary attraction. There is also the reality of modern dating, and this is where many older men quietly lose interest in pursuing relationships. Altogether, they look around and see a dating environment that feels very different from the one they knew years ago. Expectations have changed. Relationship roles have changed. The entire dynamic often feels more complicated than it once did. Many older men feel that relationships today come with a long list of expectations. They are still expected to lead, provide, plan, solve problems, remain emotionally strong, and carry responsibility. Yet many of them feel that appreciation, loyalty, and mutual effort are becoming harder to find. Whether that perception is completely accurate or not is less important than the fact that it is how many older men genuinely feel. If you've been listening this far, take a moment to subscribe. We still have some of the most important reasons ahead, and one of them explains why many older men become happier alone than most people ever expect. Now let's continue. What makes this shift significant is that older men are no longer afraid to walk away from situations that feel one-sided. When they were younger, they often stayed longer than they should have. They hoped things would improve. They believed patience would eventually solve the problem. But experience teaches different lessons. An older man has usually seen enough relationships to recognize imbalance when it appears. He notices when effort flows in only one direction. He notices when respect is inconsistent. He notices when he is expected to contribute far more than he receives in return. And unlike his younger self, he no longer feels obligated to prove anything. If a relationship feels like hard work from the very beginning, he often chooses peace instead. Not because he has stopped caring about women, but because he has stopped believing that every relationship is worth the emotional investment it demands. Many older men also stop caring because they eventually discover something that surprises even them. They realize they do not actually need a relationship in order to feel fulfilled. This is one of the biggest shifts that happens with age. A younger man often ties a large part of his identity to being wanted, needed, or chosen by a woman. An older man has usually lived long enough to separate his happiness from his relationship status. By this stage of life, many have built careers, raised children, overcome setbacks, survived losses, and achieved goals they once thought were impossible. They have learned lessons through experience that cannot be taught in books or conversations. As a result, they no longer look to women for a sense of purpose. They may still appreciate companionship, but they do not depend on it in the way they once did. This independence changes everything. When a man no longer needs a relationship to feel complete, he becomes much more selective about the relationships he allows into his life. He stops chasing attention. He stops forcing connections. He stops tolerating situations that create more stress than happiness. Instead, he begins focusing on the things that already bring him fulfillment: his hobbies, his routines, his friendships, his personal interests, the simple pleasures that make life enjoyable. What many women misunderstand is that this is not bitterness. It is freedom. An older man who enjoys his own company is not rejecting relationships. He is simply no longer willing to sacrifice his peace for one. That is why so many older men seem detached from the dating world. The truth is that they have discovered something powerful. Happiness does not always come from finding someone else. Sometimes it comes from finally being comfortable with yourself. And once a man reaches that point, He stops looking for someone to complete his life and starts looking only for someone who genuinely adds value to it. Another reason older men become less interested in relationships is because they discover something many people never expect. They learn to enjoy being alone. For most of their lives, they were told that being alone was something to avoid, that happiness meant having a partner, that success meant building a relationship, that solitude was a sign that something was missing. But as they grow older, many men discover the exact opposite. They begin experiencing a level of freedom they have not felt in years. They wake up when they want. They spend their time how they choose. They make decisions without arguments, negotiations, or expectations hanging over their heads. What started as simple independence slowly becomes something they genuinely value. This creates what many people call the loneliness paradox. From the outside, others assume an older man must feel lonely because he lives alone or spends more time by himself. But many older men do not experience it that way at all. They experience it as peace. They enjoy the quiet. They enjoy having control over their environment. They enjoy not having to constantly manage another person's emotions, moods, or expectations. The longer a man lives this way, the more protective he becomes of that freedom. He starts evaluating relationships differently. Instead of asking whether a woman is attractive or interesting, he asks whether her presence improves the life he already enjoys. If the answer is no, he feels no urgency to pursue anything further. This is why many older men become incredibly selective. Once you discover genuine contentment in solitude, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing being alone, you become much harder to pressure, manipulate, or convince into relationships that do not truly serve your well-being. Freedom stops feeling temporary and starts feeling like something worth protecting. Another reason older men stop caring about women is because they no longer tolerate disrespect, especially the kind that arrives quietly and disguises itself as normal behavior. When they were younger, many men overlook things they should not have overlooked. They ignored dismissive comments. They accepted being taken for granted. They tolerated situations where their feelings, opinions, or contributions seemed to matter less than everyone else's. At the time, they convinced themselves it was simply part of being in a relationship. Age changes that an older man has spent enough years dealing with different personalities to recognize disrespect when it appears. He no longer feels the need to explain why something bothers him. He no longer argues endlessly, trying to make someone understand his perspective. In many cases, he simply leaves quietly, permanently. What surprises many people is how calmly this happens. Younger men often react emotionally when they feel disrespected. Older men usually react differently. They create distance. They stop investing. They stop engaging. And once they reach that point, it is incredibly difficult to bring them back. This is connected to something else that develops with age: self-respect. Many older men finally learn to value themselves in ways they never did when they were younger. They stop measuring their worth through approval. They stop chasing validation. They stop accepting treatment that conflicts with the standards they have worked decades to build. The same applies to financial boundaries. Older men understand the value of what they have spent years creating: their savings, their stability, their retirement, their peace of mind. They are no longer interested in relationships that feel transactional or one-sided. The moment they sense they are being valued primarily for what they provide, rather than who they are, their interest fades quickly. At this stage of life, many older men are not looking for someone to impress. They are looking for someone who respects them, appreciates them, and brings genuine value into the life they have spent decades building. But perhaps the biggest truth of all is this: Older men do not stop caring about women. They stop caring about the wrong women. This is the part many people misunderstand. They see an older man become more distant, more selective, or less interested in dating, and assume he has given up on love. In reality, what he has given up on is drama. He has given up on one-sided relationships. He has given up on situations that demand constant effort while offering very little appreciation in return. As men grow older, their priorities become clearer. They stop chasing excitement for the sake of excitement. They stop pursuing attention simply because it feels good in the moment. They stop investing in people who bring confusion, instability, or emotional exhaustion into their lives. What they want now is much simpler, but also much harder to find. They want respect. They want honesty. They want loyalty. They want emotional calm. They want a relationship that feels like a partnership rather than a responsibility. That is why older men often appear different from younger men. They are no longer impressed by surface-level attraction alone. Beauty may catch their attention, but it is not enough to keep it. What holds their attention is character. What keeps them interested is peace. What makes them stay is consistency, appreciation, and mutual effort. The reality is that older men are not cold, bitter, or emotionally unavailable. They are wiser. They have learned through experience what adds value to their lives and what takes value away. They know what they bring to a relationship, and they no longer feel the need to convince anyone of their worth. And perhaps that is the biggest change of all. An older man who respects himself is willing to walk away from anything that threatens his peace. He does not chase. He does not argue endlessly. He does not beg for appreciation. He simply moves forward. Because after everything life has taught him, he understands something many people spend a lifetime trying to learn. Real happiness is not found in having someone beside you at any cost. It is found in protecting your peace and sharing your life only with people who genuinely make it better. If there is one lesson that sits at the heart of everything we have discussed, it is this. Older men do not withdraw from women because they have stopped believing in love. They withdraw because they have stopped believing that love is worth sacrificing their peace for. That distinction matters. For most of their lives, many men were taught to keep giving, to keep trying harder, to keep proving themselves, to keep carrying responsibilities without complaint. But age has a way of stripping away illusions. It forces people to become honest about what truly improves their lives and what quietly drains it. By the time a man reaches his later years, he has usually learned enough lessons to recognize the difference. He knows the difference between companionship and dependency. He knows the difference between respect and convenience. He knows the difference between a relationship that brings peace and one that constantly demands emotional energy. That is why so many older men appear calmer today. They are no longer chasing approval. They are no longer trying to impress everyone they meet. They are no longer willing to trade their happiness for acceptance. Instead, they choose carefully. They protect their time. They protect their energy. And most importantly, they protect their peace. If this conversation resonated with you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Here on Personality Psychology with Isabella, we explore relationships, human behavior, attraction, and the deeper truths that shape the connections we build throughout life. And remember this, older men do not stop caring about women. They stop caring about anything that costs them their peace without adding genuine value in return. The right woman will never feel like a burden. She will feel like a blessing. And that is why older men are willing to wait, willing to walk away, and willing to remain alone until they find a connection that truly deserves a place in the life they have worked so hard to build.